Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating, one of the most striking cultural and theological divides in history. We're looking at the deep, highly sensory contrasts between how the Eastern Orthodox and Western Christian traditions approach the two absolute biggest holidays of the year, Christmas and Easter. Now, both traditions share the exact same foundational beliefs, but as you'll see, how they prepare, how they fast, and how they actually celebrate couldn't look or feel more different. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to roadmap this journey, starting with the build-up to Christmas, followed by celebrating the incarnation. Then, we'll look at the road to resurrection, the climax of Easter, and finally ask, are they actually the same? Let's get started. Right off the bat, you might be wondering, when do these celebrations actually happen? Well, they don't even agree on that. The Western Church celebrates Christmas on December 25th, following the Gregorian calendar. But the Eastern Orthodox Church, they largely stick to the older Julian calendar, which places their Christmas on what the West considers January 7th. Oh, and the Armenian Orthodox Church actually has its own unique date entirely on January 6th. So before a single carol is even sung, our timelines are completely split. Part 1, the build-up to Christmas, looking at Advent versus the Nativity Fast. Let's look at the Western timeline first. You're probably familiar with Advent. It lasts for 4 weeks, and it's an incredibly visual experience. Churches are draped in purple or sometimes blue to symbolize hope. Then, on the third Sunday, known as Gaudete or Rejoice Sunday, the color suddenly shifts to rose. You got Advent wreaths with new candles lit week by week, the singing of those ancient O antiphons in the final stretch, and it all culminates on Christmas Eve when you finally light the white Christ candle. It's a really joyful, progressive buildup. But here's the thing, Advent in the West isn't just about waiting for a baby in a manger. It actually has a dual focus. It also anticipates the parousia. That's a technical term for the second coming of Christ at the end of time. This creates a really fascinating dynamic, where the West is simultaneously looking back at the Nativity and looking forward to the end of history. Pretty profound, right? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast. In the East, they don't do a joyful Advent. They observe the Nativity Fast, and wow, is it rigorous. For up to 40 days, believers completely abstain from red meat, poultry, dairy, fish, oil, and even wine. So basically, all the fun stuff is out. And the focus isn't on the parousia at all. Instead, it looks strictly backward at the Old Testament prophets and ancestors. It all wraps up with paramony on Christmas Eve, a day of strict fasting where absolutely no solid food is eaten until the very first star appears in the evening sky. Which brings us to Section 2, celebrating the incarnation. Joyful carols up against solemn vigils. You can really feel the difference in the vibe of these services. It's almost like a ping-pong match of contrasts. The Western services are super accessible. Think popular carol services, kids' and nativity plays, and traditions like the Welsh Plygain, where groups of men sing carols at dawn. The West traditionally holds 3 Eucharists, midnight, dawn, and daytime. The East, intensely solemn. We're talking all-night vigils featuring the Liturgy of St. Basil. It's highly theological. The congregation actually waits until matins to finally sing Christ is Born, and they do it while physically venerating an icon of the Nativity. If you want a perfect example of how the West makes theology accessible, just look at the Christingle service. It's a Scandinavian word meaning light of Christ. Kids hold this orange, representing the world, wrapped in a red ribbon for Christ's blood. 4 cocktail sticks go into it for the 4 corners of the earth or the seasons, skewered with sweets for the earth's fruits, and you top the whole shebang with a lit candle. It's a brilliant, tactile way the West literally lets you hold the theology of the incarnation in your hands. But step outside the church doors, and the festive meals highlight another massive difference. Modern Western Christmas is, let's be honest, heavily characterized by rampant consumerism and gift-giving. The East maintains a deeply symbolic focus. Because they're breaking that severe 40-day fast, the meal itself is the main prize. They might use white linen on the table to symbolize the baby's swaddling clothes and scatter straw for the stable. And get this, in some Orthodox cultures, instead of focusing on gifts, they literally walk out to frozen rivers, chop holes in the ice, and jump in to bless the water. I mean, no way, right? That level of dedication is incredibly impressive to modern ears. So it raises a really provocative question from the source material. By avoiding the intense consumerism of the West and leaning hard into penitence, strict fasting, and deep theological vigils, has the Eastern Church captured the real meaning of Christmas more effectively? It's a really fascinating debate for historians and theologians when they look at the modern state of the holiday. Let's move to our third part and see how this all builds. Section 3, the road to resurrection, Lent versus the Great Fast. In the West, this preparation is called Lent. You know the drill. It kicks off with Ash Wednesday, where literal ashes are smeared on foreheads as a sign of repentance. You get a quick breather on the fourth Sunday, Laetare or Rejoice Sunday, and then it ramps way up into the Easter Triduum. Those are the final 3 days of Holy Week, treated as one continuous dramatic liturgy. You've got the foot washing of Maundy Thursday, the solemn 3 p.m. crucifixion services on Good Friday, and eventually the Easter Vigil. It acts as the ultimate unified climax of the Western calendar. The East counters Lent with the Great Fast. It starts on Clean Monday with immediate strict spiritual cleansing. Halfway through, they hold an all-night vigil just to venerate the cross. Then comes Lazarus Saturday, which acts as a deliberate forerunner to the resurrection. But the most striking visual happens on Great Friday. A cloth icon depicting Jesus is literally draped over a bier, representing his tomb, and it's sprinkled with holy water and rose petals. It is a profoundly sensory mourning experience. And here is where the theology of the East ties everything together. Listen to this quote from the source material regarding the Eastern Christmas vigils. They are intentionally parallel to those held on Good Friday to illustrate the theological point that the purpose of the incarnation was to make possible the crucifixion. Think about that. The Eastern Church specifically designs its Christmas services to foreshadow the Great Fast and Good Friday. The baby in the manger is born specifically for that tomb covered in rose petals. Section 4, the climax of Easter, light in the darkness. And this brilliantly illustrates how both traditions masterfully use symbolism here, taking a shared journey from absolute darkness into light. In the West, the Easter Saturday Vigil begins after nightfall in a pitch-black church, until a brand new Paschal candle is lit, eventually bringing full light back to the congregation. The East does something similar, but on a different schedule. At their midnight Paschal Vigil, every single light and candle is totally extinguished. They wait in total silence and darkness until exactly midnight when the priest lights one single flame. From that single flame in the East, the entire congregation lights their own candles, and then it gets thrilling. They physically process outside the church in the dark, symbolically searching for Christ's body. They halt right in front of the closed church doors. The priest makes the sign of the cross, and suddenly, boom, the silence is shattered. All the church bells and percussion instruments just explode with sound. The doors fly open to signify the empty tomb, and following the liturgy, they finally break that grueling Great Fast with blessed baskets of food and a shared agape meal right in the middle of the night. 50. That is the number of days the Western Church celebrates the Easter season. From Easter Sunday all the way to Pentecost, it is celebrated as one massive, extended feast of joyful exaltation. The East is incredibly joyous too, but they focus their primary post-Easter celebration on Bright Week, a single week of zero fasting where the traditional everyday greeting literally becomes Christ is risen. Finally, Section 5. Are they the same? Time for our final evaluation. When we put these traditions side by side, the differences are absolutely stark. You've got distinct Julian versus Gregorian dates, the sheer brutality of the Eastern fasts, wild outdoor midnight processions, and totally different daytime liturgies. Honestly, the lived experience feels completely alien depending on which side you're looking at. Yet, the foundational theology of the resurrection, the 40-day preparation periods, that masterful use of light conquering darkness, those are identical. Because despite all the differences, both traditions agree on this core principle from our sources. The solemnity of Easter has the same kind of preeminence in the liturgical year that Sunday has in the week. For both the East and the West, Easter is it. It's the undisputed climax of their faith, the absolute center of gravity for their entire liturgical calendars. So the crucial point is this. We have to weigh the evidence. Yes, Easter is technically the preeminent festival, but does the Eastern Orthodox Church's incredibly intense focus on the incarnation, with that 40-day fast, the parallel Good Friday theology, and the all-night vigils, does that actually elevate Christmas to a level that rivals Easter, maybe in a way that our modern, commercialized Western Christmas just doesn't quite manage? Ultimately, considering the totally distinct calendars, the rigorous fasting rules, and the dramatically divergent worship styles we've explored today, is Easter a fundamentally different celebration in the East than it is in the West? The theology is exactly the same, but the human experience is worlds apart. I'm going to leave you to synthesize all of this and decide for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the details.